What's up, guys? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening to Tesla SPY in the overall markets. I'm also going to break down some very important levels to watch for. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Webull link. If you deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 free stocks. Deposit $500 and you're guaranteed 20, and deposit $25,000 more and you're guaranteed 75. The offer ends in just 3 weeks. Anyways, for the market, we saw a nice pump as we approached the first hour, only to be followed by this little dip that's trying to form. So I'm going to break down more information about that. Just note that we had the business optimism index report that was below expectations at 91.5. The market still held up with that also coming out. And our exports and imports were very close to expectations. Nothing was too crazy with those. And then the economic optimism index was also below expectations. Despite that, we got a temporary pump and then a dump after that. So that's how the market's reacting so far. So, what is my view of the markets? In my opinion, I was talking about SPY and Tesla. For SPY, we did push higher. I was talking about how we could get closer to 572. But the issue was this is tough resistance, right? Every time SPY has hit 572 to 575, we've gone rejected, and so far it's struggling to hold above 572. So you can see how it's slowing down already, and that could affect Tesla. And then for Tesla, we talked about some important resistance levels. We had 244 and then 247 sort of resistances. We came just short of 247 as we came short of these EMAs. So you can see how this ended up reacting so far. So Tesla kind of pumped and dumped today so far. Launched 242 as support, followed by 240. If 240 breaks, we're looking for 238s to be retested. So every $2 level is acting as a support. And if 238 fails, it's just going to be a bigger dump to the mid to low 230s. So you want to be very careful. But the way Tesla's looking, technically speaking, it's a little bit more bearish. We had a high here, came down, made a lower high, came down, lower high, came down. We even made a lower high so far today. So if Tesla hypothetically gets back above 247, if we get bullish news, we could turn back to bullish and this could pump back up to 250. So far, it is not looking like that as Tesla is trying to push to 247 only to reject so far. And we're also struggling to hold above 244. So this suggests that Tesla has a risk to the downside and we could be looking for 240 very soon. Unfortunately, the market is rejecting and we're seeing Tesla following the trend. Now, how about for SPY? Let me go back to SPY right here. SPY hits 572.5, but we haven't been able to hold above 572 so far. I want everyone to just know we have to be careful because every time SPY has hit 572 to 575, we have rejected historically. If SPY ends up dipping and loses 570, we're only 1.5 points above it. So if we lose that, we could be turning back down. As of right now, we're looking like, yes, we pumped nicely. We are seeing buyers trying to defend it, but 570 is a tough resistance, so it's not going to be easy to break through this. And we have a bunch of lower highs being maybe at a high here came down, lower high came down, lower high came down, and we could be making another lower high here before it continues to sink. So be very mindful of the risk. For ES, we tried to push as well close to all-time highs, but we have the same thing going on. Notice that ES had a head and shoulders like structure. So this was like our left shoulder. This is the head, and this is like the right shoulder. And then since then, we've also been making these rejections. We're really struggling to break and hold above these key levels. You can see how the resistance is slowing us down. So if we don't break this resistance, we could continue to reject, and there is a risk of us losing 57.80, which could lead to a decline to 57.65, and eventually much lower levels. Also, if we lose the 5700 area, we have this big gap to fall all the way down to the lower 5600s. So there is a risk of a rejection on ES at this level. It's going to be a tough resistance, so be careful. If we break 58.20, we could turn back up, but that's looking a little bit less likely. We're at some tough resistance, so be very, very careful. For others out there, we have Nvidia. Nvidia reached my price target of 132, excuse me. If that breaks, we're looking for 135. But like I said before, we have a tough resistance between 132 and 135. It is possible it tries to push a little bit more thanks to the AI event, but things could shift. And once this thing starts dipping, it's going to have a big effect on tech. So I'm still very, very realistic that there's no guarantee that this is going to hold up. Now, I also want to mention that we have 62,600 as our resistance, and we have support at 61,800. Kind of stuck in the middle here. We have a head and shoulders like structure on Bitcoin. We could be dipping a little bit lower to the 62,000 area. So be very mindful of that and be very, very careful. For other factors out there, we have NQ. NQ is once again trying to pump, but just look at 20,250 is our resistance, not to mention 20,400. If we get rejected and start dipping, we're looking for 20,000 to break. If that fails, it's just going to be a bigger dip. We do have this tough resistance up here. So we'll see if we pump a little bit more before it tries to reject. But be careful as we're at some tough resistance on NQ. So be very mindful of that. For the QQQ, we reached 488, but that's a tough resistance alongside 490. We came close to that target of 488. I think we actually met it, but now it's a tough resistance, so be careful. If we reject off 488, we could be looking for a dip back down to 485 as we have a head and shoulders. And you could also interpret this as an inverse cup and handle. So be careful. If 488 does not hold, we could be looking for a dip back down to 485. Apple tried to rebound to try to fill this gap, but we're testing some tough resistance at 225. If it rejects off 225, we could be looking for the lows to be retested. If it breaks down, we could be looking for 230. As of right now, it's tough resistance and we're struggling to break through, so there is a risk of it dipping back down to 222. For the IWM, we have resistance at 218. If that breaks, we have this gap to fill up to about 219. We could hit 218, then reject and start dipping back down to 215, so be very mindful of that. So we'll see how things end up going. For Coinbase, coin is kind of rejecting off 176. If we break 169, we could turn back up. Otherwise, there's a risk of it coming down to fill this gap. I think the risk is still there, and we could be looking for 163 very soon. With a Prime Day, Amazon's trying to rebound, but be careful as we're hitting our 200 EMA, where we have resistance at 182.9 and then 183.9. If it rejects off that level, we could be dipping back down to 180, so be careful. For Meta, we're also hitting a tough resistance around 600. We came down. We're making a lower high, so if Meta does not get back to 600, we're at risk of coming down to 583, if not lower. For Microsoft, we're looking. We tried to rebound a bit, but just know that we haven't been able to crack past 416 yet. We're testing previous resistance, which is previous support becoming resistance at 414. If it rejects there, we could be dipping back down to 410. For Google, we're making lower highs. We have resistance around 166. If this rejects, we could be dipping lower all the way down to where this gap is at 163. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. So be very, very mindful of that. With that being said, guys, the market is once again in a very, very interesting place, but Tesla's still showing some weakness. The reason I'm saying weakness is because despite the fact that we're green, Tesla's still making lower highs. We haven't been able to crack past our resistance at 247 yet, and 244 is still holding Tesla back. So Tesla's still being held back. We have to give this some time, but just know that patience is going to be very key for Tesla. And even if we do dip a little bit more, it's going to be okay because the closer we get to the robotaxi event, the more likely it is for the next catalyst to affect us. And we'll see if the robotaxi event causes Tesla to bounce or not. So be very patient, guys. We'll see how things end up going. With that being said, I just want to really say I appreciate you guys for your attention. Please leave a like if you like this video. Leave a comment down below to leave your thoughts for me, and we'll see how things end up going from here. The market is trying to push higher, but be careful as we're approaching some tough resistance. So I want to just let you guys know to watch it carefully and be very patient. We need to see if Tesla could break 247. If not, we're at risk of rejecting, so be careful. There is still a risk of more downside. All right, thanks for listening, and peace out.